Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are today. I want to welcome you to the Flying Dutchman podcast, all things aviation, most things military. And on this episode, we're fortunate to have Phil Linzer and Mike. Mike, how do you pronounce your last name correctly?
You want my real last name or the book last name?
Give me the book last name.
Smith.
Give me the real name. If you
Thomas, Thomas.
just Thomas.
And
Okay.
you can thank my wife for that difference.
And I will thank your wife and a shout out to your wife. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let the audience know who our guests on the Flying Dutchman are. Typically, we are aviation, most things military, and we do have that. Is Phil was a Cobra pilot in the Marine Corps during the early 70s, and Mike here was a Marine sniper. And I had purchased his book, and I realized that we're going to deviate a little bit because it's a great story. And it's a story about his last mission in Vietnam as a Marine sniper. And let me just read a little bit to you, the people out there, is the final Vietnam combat mission of Michael T. Smith. He was a Marine Scout sniper. Like most Marines, it's not just his job, it's who he is. This is the story of how his final mission played out, how what happened evolved and got complicated. It's a story of his worst day and in some grueling ways, his best. He is a hero. In this tiny slice of page turning history, we find vivid descriptions of combat. We learn the ways Marine snipers prepared and operated. And prepared is a key word. I had no idea what goes into preparation. There's more than just sighting your rifle. We learn how this man persevered and survived. The author, Phil, a fellow Marine, chronicles the events and actions in a fast paced, enthralling narrative. We learn of the mechanics of what Mike was doing and get the feel of being there with each page taking us deeper and deeper. And indeed, it does. Included are bonus conversations with Mike, adding to our knowledge, understanding, and our feel for it all. His war. And there's more to war than just death or victory, more to an assignment than completing the mission. There are times in combat when unthinkable events occur and quiet heroes are forced to step up. And and I'll show the book here. Like a lot of people that are said, you're a hero, you're a hero. The person being told a hero, they don't, and Mike, I maybe you'll agree, is you don't feel like a hero. You were doing your job to the best of your ability, the best way you knew how. But before we get to that, tell me a little bit about your growing up, where you grew up, and you did a lot of hunting as a kid. Your
Yes,
father
I
was
was
a
the son of my father was a veterinarian. He had a 5 acre parcel in Merced County, California.
Mhm.
He was county livestock inspector and county poundmaster, and he was a hunter. I killed my first duck when I was 8 or 9, killed my first deer when I was 12, and hunting was part of my life.
Mhm.
I became, with his instructions and help and mentoring, an extremely good shot. We would go to ham and turkey shoots where if you won a round with a shotgun, you got a free ham or a free turkey or whatever.
Oh,
And me as a 12, 13-year-old kid, I was beating guys that had fancy Benelli shotguns and so forth. And everybody look at me and say, "Who's that?" And they'd say, "Well, that's Doc Thomas's kid." And they just say, "Oh." Then they understood, because my dad was known to be one of the best shots in the county, or
mm.
probably in the state. I saw him shoot 3 deer one day in Nevada with a horseback running up a hill, and all 3 deer were running, and it was one shot per deer.
Wow.
So
So he was
yeah,
riding
that's
the horse up a hill and engaging these deer. One shot
yes,
went.
shot 3 of them.
Wow, that's impressive. And
When we would prepare to go deer hunting, we had a 100-yard range behind his hospital, between the hospital and the house. And when I could fire 5 shots in the size of a quarter at that 100 yards with my deer rifle that he had built for me, I could come in the house for dinner. So Uh, Dove hunting. We were avid dove hunters. I would shoot doves out of the back of a moving pickup. I would shoot flying doves, and I was good for 95 out of 100, and so forth. So just I saddle a horse after school, go out in the orchards and shoot jackrabbits. I'd shoot running jackrabbits off of a moving horse, and just was part of my life.
Mm-hmm. And
So
so at what age were you when you joined the Marine? Did you drafted? You don't know. You joined, didn't you?
I would know I was drafted.
You were drafted. Okay. How
I
old were
was
you?
drafted. I was 20.
Okay.
I had a knee injury in high school, so I was 1Y ineligible for draft. I got called when I was working for my company down in Bakersfield for another physical. I drove to Pomona, got a physical, and they said, we're going to reclassify you 1A. And I thought, okay, fine. Send me my draft card. I got to go back to work. Well, this sergeant in the Army, he was overweight, had a wrinkled uniform on, says, I'm going to induct you today. And I looked at him and I said, can you do that? And he looked at me and said, I can do any effing thing I want. So about that time, there was a tap on my left shoulder, and I turned around, and here's a Marine Corps gunnery sergeant, dressed blues, about 6'2", not an ounce of fat on him anywhere, and said, how would you two gentlemen like to come with me? And I said, well, he tells me I'm going to Fort Ord. And he looked at me and he says, I outrank you, in a very stern voice. So I said, you mean he's telling me I'm going to Fort Ord, but you tell me I can go with you? He said, that's right, son. So I turned around, and one of the few acts of defiance in the military career, I went just like this to the sergeant and got up and walked out of the room.
That probably
And
felt
then
good.
I asked the gun sergeant, I asked the gunnery sergeant, can I call my wife and my work and tell him I'm not going to be home anytime soon? He got a real serious, stern look on his face, and he said, what'd you call me? And I said, sir. Then he got a big old grin. He said, you're going to do just fine. So that night, I ended up in MCRD in San Diego.
Oh, that night.
As a Marine Corps draftee. That night. Yeah.
Oh,
Didn't have 30 days to prepare that night.
Wow. That was pretty. And your employer? And your
I
employer
called him
was...
and I says, I'm sorry, I got inducted into the Marine Corps. I'll see you in a couple of years. And I called my wife. I says, you better get your tail down here and pick up our car. I had a 68 Mustang that was really hot. And I said, I don't care how you do it, but you get down here tonight and pick up my car. So
and she had to go all the way to Pomona? Where is that? Where
she drove from Bakersfield to Pomona. Yeah.
huh. Interesting. And how well did you do in basic training? How was that?
I did well.
Did you?
My father was pretty strict, which made me in basic training. I was, used to following orders, and I was used to doing what I was told to do. So I did well, and
well,
it was just right after basic training that it was right after basic training that I was offered the opportunity for Scout Sniper.
And it's because you were shooting
because
so
I
well.
broke the range.
Oh,
yes, I broke the range record at Pendleton for a boot, fired a 248 out of a possible 250.
Wow.
So,
wow. And what year is this again? Just to remind myself and the audience.
This would have been 1968.
Wow. And where was the sniper school they sent you to? Was it back east?
Okay, sniper school was at Camp Lejeune, South Carolina.
What was that like?
Well, I was very fortunate. If you ask around any Marine and throw out the name Carlos Hathcock, he's a legend in the Marine Corps, known for his ability as a sniper. He's an Ozark hillbilly kid, learned to shoot before he went in the service, like I did. And he was my instructor, which I credit him with saving my life many a times because of what he taught me. And when we got there, uh, me and this other kid. He says, I know you guys can shoot, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So now I'm going to teach you how to stay alive. And that's basically what he did. He is the one that taught us about eating the food that the natives ate. He's taught me about how to not move, how to move, how to breathe, um, what to watch for, little subtle things. And everything he taught me at one time or another came into play during my tours in Vietnam or Laos. Because he told me, he says, you're going to be in Laos once in a while. Our president, President Johnson, says we don't go into Laos. We can't go into Laos. Well, I did most of my hunting in Laos. So that's where eating with those folks ate really came in handy because the guard dogs they had were Rottweilers and they were all trained to smell Americans. One night I had one walk right across my legs, never smelled me, never knew I was there.
Oh, my
And all I could do with
stars.
my mind was say, thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Carlos.
Mm-hmm.
So he was a very soft-spoken person. If you were doing your job and doing it well, he would
Mm-hmm.
call you by last name. If he had a problem with you, he'd call you by your rank. And if you got called by your rank, then you better open your ears up and listen.
Mm-hmm.
So he was quite a man.
How long was the training for?
I was 30 days and then shipped directly to Vietnam.
Wow. So you didn't get to go home on leave after training?
No, no.
Hmm. Wait.
Between boot camp and ITR, I had a weekend off. But after ITR, I was supposed to get a month's leave. But then with me agreeing to go into sniper training, that got by the wayside.
Oh, I see. So you
Yeah.
flew by whichever way you arrive in Vietnam. And the one thing I notice when I read books about people that go to other countries is when that door opens and they step out the door, they recognize they can smell the humidity or they can smell odor. But Vietnam had its own odor when you stepped off the aircraft, didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the tension was humongous. People were always thinking somebody's going to get killed today. And death was in the air no matter where you went. So that was something you had to get used to.
Mm-hmm. And where did they send you to when you arrived in
I,
Vietnam?
I was in a small camp right at the North-South Vietnam parallel, and Dong Hai, I believe, is the name of it, going
Mm-hmm.
from memory.
Mm-hmm.
And it was right on the eastern side of Vietnam, not too far from the water. Khe Sanh, the famous Battle of Khe Sanh, was in the middle, and then the Laotian border was to the west. And every time I'd go into Laos, I'd fly right over Khe Sanh in the helicopter. I was at Khe Sanh once, not the major battle that was there because that was some years prior, but there was another small battle at Khe Sanh, and I was sent over there to help protect the Marines from some North Vietnamese bad people. So I was in that camp once, and
Wow.
it was a very very substantial camp.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what the Marines did there and defending and beating off the Vietnamese over that week's period of time was unbelievable. Of course, they had help from things like Puff the Magic Dragon,
Mm-hmm.
which was an Air Force gunship that had miniguns, two miniguns on it,
Mm-hmm.
and the Huey Cobras, the like what Phil flew. Those folks were fabulous in protecting Khe Sanh.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a very major. And I know the North Vietnamese wanted to recreate Dien Bien Phu, how they did the French in the late or mid 50s. I can't recall exactly, but um, Laos that we never went to, they'd never admitted that we were there, but there was your when a mission is presented, you guys, And the mission to Laos is you can decline the mission, if I understood correctly, reading your book.
That is correct.
You,
They would bring a group of us in and they would explain what assignment, we would call them assignments.
mm-hmm.
They would explain what the assignment was. And basically, whoever raised their hand got the assignment. If nobody raised their hand, then that was a problem. And I can't recall an instance where there was never a time when nobody raised their hand. When my assignment came up, I was the only one that raised my hand because I felt a burning desire to eliminate the man that was causing the death of children, to cause our troops and the South Vietnamese troops and natives great damage. So I raised my hand. I said, I'll go. I want to go alone. And they said, you're not going alone. This assignment requires a spotter. And I argued a little bit, but then was told to shut up. I was taking a spotter. So I was able to name my spotter, which Jonathan had worked with me before. So I said, can I take Jonathan? And they said, yes, you can.
That's good that you get to pick your spotter. But there was, prior, the policy was that you can go alone. You didn't need a spotter on some missions.
On what they considered non-high priority missions, we were allowed to operate alone. Okay. I know Carlos once told me, if you can go alone, because spotters got a way of getting killed. So I almost half my missions in Vietnam and Laos, I was alone. Usually it was on a scouting mission where I wasn't out there to dispatch anybody. I was just out there to gather intel and bring it back, because we didn't have cell phones back then, or we couldn't call home, so to speak. So you take notes on a little pad and you take it back and report.
Well, yeah, and that's part of the sniper training is observation, not being seen, and getting out. I want to expand on your targets for the audience to know what Mike was alluding or speaking to, is that he was a colonel in the North Vietnamese Army, if I remember his rank correctly.
I believe so, yes.
And what this gentleman did, like in combat, there are ways to think of combating the enemy, think outside the box, think of a way to inflict the most damage with the least amount of resources or whatever. What this evil North Vietnamese colonel decided was that they would modify a grenade, strap them to children, tell the children that by initiating the triggering of the grenade, they will be given candy. And the Americans already, just how you are, even all the way back to World War II and before, is you love, even in Afghanistan, giving little Kellogg's cereal boxes to kids. Kids knew that American GIs are going to give them a Coca-Cola, going to give them candy, give them gum. And so by doing what these people are telling you, you are guaranteed you're going to get some treats from the Americans. So when they got close to the Americans, it's time to request that treat by initiating and detonating the hand grenade, blowing the children up, blowing our soldiers up, blowing other children nearby. And it became a successful tactic. And you started being afraid of the children, not knowing who's strapped. So Mike was given the opportunity to accept a mission because the intelligence told us that this colonel is going to go on a little R&R to a certain location in Laos where he was going to enjoy some fine food, fine spirits, and women, and he was going to relax. And well, Mike was put out there to put a stop to his fun. And then Mike, how did you prepare for this mission? It's not like you had to leave the next day.
No, I had, I think it was 12, 13 days. I was given intel, so I knew what the colonel looked like. I knew how many vehicles would be in his little convoy. But more importantly, I had to prepare my body. I had to start eating what the folks in that province ate, so that, and Jonathan and I the same, because we were going to be in Laos, on Laos soil, for a good amount of time. And knowing that the French mansion where he would be staying, they had guards, and we positioned ourselves far enough away where the guards wouldn't come out to us, but just in case they did, we wanted to make sure they wouldn't see us or smell us. So, shooting, the shot was about 700 yards, 680 according to Jonathan. And my weapon was it was well within its capabilities. And so we got there before daylight, got up on a little grassy knoll, and we decided what the range was. My rifle is sighted in already at 400 or 500 yards. So additional couple of 100 yards, I don't have to make any knob changes. I just move the dots up or down a little bit, because to make a knob change makes clicks. And if you have a dog close by, that dog will hear those clicks and you're dead at that point.
How you didn't walk into Laos, you had to take a Huey ride. How long
We
was
took a Huey ride to the Vietnam Laos border, and the Huey dropped us off just outside of the Laotian border. Then we went into the jungle and we walked, it was about 3 or 4 clicks. And then we donned our ghillie suits before the jungle's end. And then we crawled about 500, 600 yards over to where the grassy knoll was that we were going to wait and make our shot.
how long of a wait was that?
About a 4 hour wait.
Wow. So it's not like you could get up and crack your back or shake it out and look
No,
around and
no,
lay still.
you don't move, period. You lay still.
You get the bugs.
And I mean, you can't wear bug spray because the dogs will smell it. If bugs land on you, they land on you. Your shirt is buttoned at the sleeves, it's buttoned at the collar, so nothing can get down inside of you. But yeah, your face is exposed. We've got wax on our faces to match the camouflage of the ground. And our little soft hats, we'd wear different colors to match the color of the surrounding terrain. But yeah, there's no bug spray. And at that point in time, your hand signals, you don't talk to each other, because out there in those valleys, a voice will carry a long way. And, Jonathan would tap me on the shoulder, or I'd tap him on the shoulder. And when he tapped me on the shoulder, I looked at him and he said, "Dust." He didn't say the word, just mouthed the word "dust." And I looked off to the right, and I saw the dust of the vehicles coming.
Game time. How many vehicles were in the convoy?
There was 3.
There were 3.
The colonel was in the second vehicle, and there was 2. They were Jeep-like, they're not big vehicles, Jeep or half-track type vehicles. The colonel was in a Jeep type vehicle.
He in your book, you kind of talk a little bit about he was known as kind of a hothead in the ranks or something to that effect. And when he exited the vehicle, he was already yelling at people or something. He was barking orders or doing something, that he didn't just rush into the building. He presented himself as a good target for you, didn't he?
Yeah, he got out of the vehicle. He had a nickname on our side. We nicknamed him Banny Rooster. And because he was he people know he was the top dog. And there was about 6 or 8 steps that led up to the entrance of the mansion. He gets up to the top step, stops, turns around, and he's waving his arms, issuing orders. And that presented a very good target for myself. And I waited for him to lower his arms. I had my crosshairs on the part of his head that I wanted him to be. I exhaled out, took exhaled in, let half a breath out, and my trigger finger continued to squeeze the trigger. The rifle went off and he dropped. One shot, 1 kill.
Very good. And the people that he was barking orders to, I believe there were Rottweilers present too. What's up there? I mean, those dogs were indeed
Yes.
present at this location,
Oh, yeah.
and they didn't know where the shot came from. So their reaction was not really a threat to you or Jonathan, because they just basically sprayed in all directions or some that effect, and you were able to make your exit after that shot.
Yeah, we were the mansion was in a little valley, and the shot could have come from anywhere as far as they knew.
Mm.
And they were spraying bullets and everything and shouting and screaming. We very quietly crawled back to the edge of the jungle, crawled back into the jungle where you couldn't see us if we stood up, uh, took off our ghillie suits, packed them away, and started heading toward our extraction point. At that point, feeling pretty good about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Successful mission. They didn't know where we were. Nobody was following us, and so forth.
And you had to go the same number of clicks to, or was the LZ different from the pickup point, or was it the same location?
Same exact location.
Okay. So that's quite a hump you got to make, not knowing if you're being
Well, it would have
pursued.
taken us, if we hadn't been wounded, we could have traversed that cells in an hour and a half, easy. If we'd have been in a hurry, probably closer to an hour, stopping to rest a little bit, maybe an hour and a half at the most. But it would have been an easy trek.
And not knowing if there's a patrol out there somewhere, just, and this is in Laos, and there were Hmong, which are great people that were working with us, but then there were Laotians that were very much against us. And if you were captured by the Laotians, the bad guy Laotians, it's not very pretty what they do to Americans when they get a hold of them. So I could imagine.
No, yeah. I mean, we were on high alert. There's no question there, but we could move. We knew the trail, and we were always obviously alert, and we would stop every so often and kind of look around and listen. But it would have been a good trek back had I not hit the tripwire.
And that's where we're coming to now is that they did have booby traps set up out there, and they're masters of booby traps. And unfortunately, Jonathan was behind you as you guys were making your way to the pickup point when the tripwire was hit, and you both sustained injuries. And tell us what happened.
Yes, I was in the lead. Felt the fire and knew what it was, but Jonathan was so close to me. I dove to the deck, didn't even have time to say booby trap when the grenade went off, and it caught my lower left leg. Had shrapnel go in through the left side and come out the inside, and it caught Jonathan in his left abdomen, lower upper leg, left abdomen, the majority of the grenade. So we both went down. He's moaning pretty bad. I looked at my leg, took my belt off, made a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. And then I went to address Jonathan's wounds. I gave him an injection of morphine to help him. Ended up giving him 2 injections. And finally, he quieted down and passed out. I bandaged him up with pretty much all the bandages we had, and realized that, number one, the thought of leaving him never entered my mind. So I'm in my mind, okay, how are we going to get that way to get picked up? And I decided that I took his poncho, wrapped him in it, secured him, and rolled him over on my back, secured him with the arms of the poncho, or sleeves, should I say, and started crawling. I secured the weapons to my feet with my shoelaces, bootlaces, and I started crawling. And I would stop every so often to let the tourniquet on my leg loose a little bit, and check on him during the next 6, 7 hours. I had to give him 2 more injections of morphine, which was all we had. We had a total of 4 when we started. I had 2, he had 2. I never took any, and I gave him everything. And I knew that if we didn't make the extraction time by a certain time, they would assume us captured or dead, and they wouldn't come back.
And
If they failed 3 times, take us out. And that was standard. That wasn't just for us. That was standard. We didn't have any dog tags, any insignias on the clothes we wore, because we weren't supposed to be there. And the good Lord gave me the strength to do what I had to do to get from point A to point B. There's no way I would have made it without God's help.
I truly believe that. And you've got Jonathan strapped to your back. You're having to crawl that distance. You only get 3 chances to being extracted. And the last chance by this time was your only chance. By the time I couldn't imagine what you did, and you did it. And not only that, you kept talking to Jonathan, keep him, let's go, Marine. Let's, okay, buddy, let's go. Hoorah. Is on the cover of your book.
Well, I told him, I said, and something that's filled in from the book, I kept telling him, you're not going to die on me. God's not going to let you die on my back.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while, he would moan a little bit or something, and I know he was alive. Mm-hmm. But the last hour or so, and I'm starting to panic a little bit about making the extraction point. So I'm just going, and my mind is concentrating on elbow, knee. I developed a cadence, so to speak, of the best way I could move and wear myself out to the point where I couldn't move. And so when the closer we got to the Vietnam border, the more intense I got on getting us there. And when we came out of the jungle, the border was literally right there. So right on the edge of the jungle, I could hear the helicopter hit the blades coming. We were that close to the last extraction. And so I popped green smoke to let them know where I was. And the chopper pilot, he had been there the first 2 times. So he knew that there was a problem. And normally they'll make a circle and come in to verify that it's safe for them to pick us up. He came straight in, landed 50 feet, 75 feet from us. And the corpsman and one of the crew members came running out of the chopper. I motioned with my thumb to Jonathan. I says, take care of him. And the corpsman looked at him, and he looked back at me and just shook his head. He didn't have to say anything. So they very, very gingerly took Jonathan off my back, got me up in the chopper, did as much medical attention to my left leg as they could, but the corpsman did a wonderful job. Navy corpsman did a wonderful job. And then they very, very lovingly, gingerly placed Johnson in the floor of the helicopter and made them strap him down so he wouldn't roll around or anything. Mm-hmm. And then we took off back to our camp. So it took about a half an hour, and all I could do, they gave me a big shot of morphine, so I wasn't feeling anything. If anything, I was probably a little bit happy, but not proud of that. And we landed. Within minutes, I was on the operating table, and like Phil said in the book, I never saw Jonathan again, which was very, very upsetting to me. I at least wanted to say goodbye. And I went from the operating table. The chief surgeon there at our camp knew that if I didn't have better surgical procedures, I would probably lose my lower left leg. And as again, God would have it, there's a C-5 in a big airfield not very far away, heading for San Diego. So I don't know what it cost him, a case of booze or what, but myself and a corpsman are on that C5. I mean, I was out of it. They had to be full of morphine, so I didn't know what the hell was going on. Next, I really realized that I'm in Balboa Hospital, Naval Hospital in San Diego, where they got some of the finest facilities in the world.
Yes.
And I had 2 more surgeries on my left leg, and I was told that my left leg was going to be kept. So that was wonderful.
That is wonderful. At what year is this now? Is it still 1968 or are we in 1969 now?
No, we're in I think it's January of 1970,
Okay.
because I was
Okay.
I was in Vietnam for more than one tour. I
Okay.
volunteered for a second, a part of a third tour.
Wow.
So I completed my second tour fine, signed up for the third tour, and it was in the first month, I think, of the third tour when I got wounded.
Um, I think somebody and myself, I was in the peacetime army, but I do kind of get it because somebody that hasn't might not get it that why would you volunteer to stay in combat again? And the answer, I believe, is because you were there to protect the other Marines. You were there because you had a skill set that could benefit them, and they're your brothers in arms. You're not there for any other reason than to take care of those. Would that be accurate for your logic for
That's
volunteering?
very correct. Marines, any military people, you're trained to be a unit,
Mm-hmm.
and you're trained to protect those within your unit.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the Marines a little more so, just like the thought of leaving Jonathan behind never once entered my mind. And so, yes, I re-upped because I knew my skill set was making a difference, saving military lives, saving civilian lives. And it's not that I enjoyed doing it. If anybody says that you like doing it, I'll slap them because I didn't enjoy doing it. I ask for God's forgiveness after every successful outing to forgive me for what I've done. But in my mind, I felt that number one, the Marine Corps trained me. Number two, we had a motto. My platoon commander, God created the Marine Corps to protect Americans so they could worship him.
Like
And
that.
that's how I autograph all my books. Yeah. And
Like
if we were in camp anywhere where there was a decent church, we went to church every Sunday.
mm-hmm.
Oh, the good Lord inspired me. I believe I followed his wishes because he's taken pretty good care of me since then. And I've had a few ups and downs, but I know that I'm where I am today because the good Lord wants me to be here.
Apparently he does. And he made you a handsome man too, Mike. Look at you. But
Thank you.
I want to talk about that you didn't get to say goodbye to Jonathan,
No,
but you did want to meet his family. You did perhaps want to convey what it was like working with Jonathan. He sounded like a pretty cool guy and a great spotter.
well, yeah,
Did and you were told that
I
that's not your
yeah,
job or something to that effect?
yeah. I requested a wife, girlfriend's mother's phone number and address, and now that Phil and I did a lot of research because we were in a country we weren't supposed to be in. Number one, he was killed in a country that he wasn't supposed to be in. They weren't going to give me any information. And so I got my piece with him about 6 years ago. My wife and I went to Washington, D.C., and I went to the Vietnam Wall because you could put the soldier's name, service in there, and it would give you the panel, the row, and the line in the row where his name was. So we went to the Vietnam Wall. I found Jonathan's name, and when my fingertips touched his name, his spirit spoke to me. And one of the most touching moments of my life. I mean, I broke down and wept like a baby. And he told me he was okay. So I got some closure there.
That's
But
awesome.
I still have a hard time way deep down inside thinking if I hadn't hit that tripwire, he'd be alive today. And that haunts me. It does. Phil, being the author of the book,
Mm-hmm.
has gone a long ways in helping me with that pain. And I really appreciate and respect him for that.
And Phil, that for you to recognize that Mike's carrying that guilt and um things happen for a reason. We know that we not know the plans that God has for us. And I that you recognized and you've been a big help. You've heard other veteran stories in the course of your occupation. You let's kind of pick up with Phil here. Is you had seen Mike at church, or but and maybe in passing, but not until like a lot of churches, after services, there's a kitchen or somewhere near sanctuary that has food and people gather, have coffee and juices, and the kids run around with cookies and the adults talk. And you saw this handsome gentleman with an apron on. I'm not sure what you were cooking or if you were cleaning, but it had the Marine Corps emblem, and you, Phil, prior Cobra pilot, in the Marine Corps, were drawn to that. And there are no coincidences in God's dichotomy. And so you approached Mike and asked about the Marines. Could you kind of pick up right there where you guys met?
Well, that's exactly right, Dutch. Mike is part of the Help Everybody crew at our church, and he has many hats that he wears at our church. One of those hats is part of the kitchen crew. And it's interesting, as I point out in the book, we both have attended that church for, well, him longer than me, probably, but at least 20 years for us. And I had not met Mike before, but seeing that apron on with the Marine Corps emblem on it, of course, did prompt me to say to him, "Hey, Semper Fi, Mac, tell me, where were you? What'd you do?" And, we've just heard him retelling the story that he told me. And just immediately hearing that story from him, he told me about Carlos. He told me about Jonathan. I said, "My gosh, Mike, has anybody ever written this down for you?" And of course, no one had at that point. And so we started working together on doing that. And every time I hear him talk, I admire what he did, given what he was confronted with. I mean, the whole evolution of what happened to Mike, getting drafted one day, just being pulled into the Marine Corps, going to the rifle range, setting the new record at the rifle range, training under Carlos Hathcock, learning how to live and be a part of the jungle. I mean, those kinds of achievements, I can't even imagine what it takes in internal commitment to get up and go. I mean, that is one heck of a job that somebody asked you to go do.
I agree.
And then to do it so well and save so many others. When you actually look at the nature of the individuals he was assigned and what they were doing, these are very bad people killing many, many Americans. And he did things that saved Marines. So hard to hear him talk about Jonathan and how meaningful that relationship was to him. And I think it's a story that we can all learn something from. So I admire the guy immensely.
Yes, and Mike, to put it out there and share it, and is especially for men, there's a certain vulnerability to that, and I appreciate you guys being on the show and Mike specifically talking about that, because you probably cannot put a number on it, but I guarantee that there's a lot of papas with a lot of grandkids because of you and the role of the sniper.
Well, it's quite interesting too, Dutch, how the human mind works. I mean, we just cannot cannot keep our internal mind from turning the tables on what happened and saying to yourself, I could have done more. And that's definitely where Mike was in his thinking about those events
I can hear it.
as we started delving into this. And
Mhm.
I'm so happy that the progress we've made is continuing on. We're making great progress and getting through that and living with what God has given us to deal with, you know?
Yeah. Yes. And talking with Mike
I
offline.
want to interrupt here for 1 second.
Go ahead.
This this book had Phil talk to me that day and told me he was in any other branch of service than the Marine Corps, this book never would have been written because I would have blown him off.
Uh-huh.
And that's why I know God brought us together. And he knew Phil being a Marine, me being a Marine, that I would listen to him. So had Phil been Air Force, Navy, Army, whatever, this book never would have been written.
Even you,
So
Coast
I
Guard.
just got to say, thank you, Lord, for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's to your point is I'm certain that we have other veterans from the Gulf War, from Iraqi freedom, from Afghanistan that have some similarity in their life, that perhaps this is something that they can look at, and there might be some healing process that they need, and to talk about it, and to help them in their journey. And I think this book is um, it's about your last mission. It's about coming
Have you seen
home from that.
Have you seen the movie We Were Soldiers?
I have not. I have not.
Go rent it and watch it. It's about the 101st Airborne in Vietnam, the first major conflict. Major or Colonel Hal Moore was their commanding officer, and his first sergeant, his first name was John. I don't remember his last name, but you watch that movie, and then I'll let you know here. I had the distinct pleasure of meeting John.
Oh,
Tall, lanky guy. He was the first sergeant to Colonel Moore. They were 400 men being attacked by about 4,000 Viet Cong.
my gosh.
And it was a 3-day battle, and they survived. And in my civilian life, I'm at a place down in San Diego. It's a limousine rental company. John is the general manager. I walk in because I'm supposed to do a safety inspection.
Plumley.
That's the
Thank
last
you.
name.
Plumley.
Yeah. He
Good looking up.
So we got through talking, and I could tell he was military. And so I just looked at him and I said, "What branch?" And he said, 101st. Well, my respect kind of went up a little bit because usually if the guy says Army, I say, "I'm sorry," you know. And so he says 101st. And so then I looked at him, and then he just said, "Yeah, I was there." It's like we're talking without talking, you know. And he said, "Yeah, I was there." And he said, "Oh, I can't think of the actor's name."
Mel Gibson.
No, Mel Gibson was the colonel. Sam Elliott. Sam Elliott played his first sergeant, and he said, "Sam Elliott did me justice." And I said, "Okay, what happened afterward?" And he says, "I got stateside. I buried myself into a bottle of Jack Daniels. I lost my wife, lost my kids, couldn't find a job for 5 years. And one day, God called me back to my hometown church. Didn't want to go, but I did. Went to church that Sunday. After church, the pastor came out, put his arm around me, and said, 'John, it's time for you to get your head out of your ass.' And he got a big old grin. He says, 'I got my wife back, got my family back, and got a good job.'"
Wow, sounds like a
But that's
Baptist
where
church.
God, I don't know what it was. But so that's a story I enjoy telling, even though he was Army, but 101st Airborne, they're all right. And to hear him talk, we both had tears in our eyes. And I told him a little bit about my story. And of course, a book then wasn't even thought of.
Uh-huh.
And so we stayed there at his job way past closing time talking and parted with a handshake.
Uh-huh.
And I've heard now here that he's passed away, which is too bad because I would love to go see him again.
You'll just have to wait.
Yeah.
Yeah. The I want to talk about something too, that you were in a country that we were technically in, and you were going to Mare Island for business. Is that and
Yes.
Mare Island, for a lot of people that don't know, at one time was a major West Coast submarine base, and they supported the submarines, modifications. There was a munitions depot there. And back in the day, it was kind of cool to see all these submarines lined up across the waterway from the Grotto restaurant. And that's where I met my wife, and she would take me there so I could see submarines. But tell me about what happened that you didn't know was going to happen that led up to an event not too long ago.
This was about gosh, 14 years ago, I think, or something like that. Anyway, I was senior risk management inspector for National Interstate Insurance Company. And I was assigned to go check out this company that was a contractor at Mare Island. And because I had military credentials, they knew I could get on the base. So I go there and I produce my Marine ID. And this young lieutenant pulls me up in the computer and he looks at this and he goes, "Oh, you're a Bronze Star recipient." And I said, "No, I'm not." He goes, "Yeah, you are. It says right here, Bronze Star." I says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I never got it." And of course, back then there's no computers. And the way I was evacuated out of Vietnam back into the Naval Hospital in San Diego, stuff never caught up to me. And the reason I knew I had a Purple Heart was because a doctor pinned it on my pillow in my bed down there. That's the only reason I knew I had a Purple Heart. So I says, "Well, I don't have it." He says, "Well, I can get it for you." He says, "Can you get me a picture of you in your dress blues?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Email it to this address and I will send you your Bronze Star. And you can erase this part if you want." But I just said, I don't want Obama to sign it because he was our president at that time. And he laughed. He says, no, if anything, it'll be the Secretary of the Navy or whatever. So about a month later, I got the Bronze Star and the medal here in the mail. And that's how I got it. So when Phil got us down to this dinner at Merced, this general down there properly presented me with my medals, which, Phil, you don't know what that did for me. I mean, that was just something that was unbelievable that I never expected, number one. And it's working with my wife, so that's number two. But
we were pretty excited about that night, Mike. We were pretty excited.
That general talked to me face to face, almost whispering for 2 or 3 minutes. And he talked to me how number one, he apologized for our country, the way they had failed to recognize my service and how much he appreciated my service. Now, this is a brigadier general, and so all I could do was shake his hand. I wanted to hug him, but I was afraid to. So I could just shake his hand and tell him thank you. And if you want some pictures, we got some good pictures we can send to you that you can post if you want about that evening.
I would like that. You could email them to my email.
Okay. All right.
I would like that. Wow. And
we did have this opportunity to go down and make a presentation at the Castle Air Museum that's in Merced. Interestingly, that's the town, of course, that Mike grew up in. And they have an annual dinner. And when we knew that we were going to be making a presentation there, I made contact with the guy that was arranging that event and asked him if they had some senior military people that might help us recognize Mike with the pinning. Generally, when you're awarded a Bronze Star, you're presented that award at a formal formation with your entire unit standing observing as those awards are presented.
Pretty huge.
Yeah, this never, of course, happened for Mike. And we thought this might be an ideal opportunity, given that the audience that we were in front of was predominantly military people who now are volunteering their time serving on the foundation board or in ancillary roles there at the Castellaire Museum. So a lot of those people, when we asked Mike to come forward for the pinning that night, and the general had those 2 medals to pin to his chest, first time that had ever happened, probably 3/4 of the room or 2/3 of the room joined us on the stage. When I invited all the veterans to come forward, it was about 2/3 of the room that came forward, wasn't it, Mike? It was a very
Yes,
nice.
it was very, very moving.
Yes.
That is very moving. And it kind of gave Mike, it kind of gave your wife a different perspective of you, your history, and of herself. And it actually led to maybe an enlightenment or something, but it also became part of maybe
Well, as she said to us, she was reluctant to hear the details of what had occurred because war is not a pleasant topic in many ways. And much of what Mike endured, she had never been told. And so that evening, she did have the opportunity to hear us telling the story. And as Mike has related, that's been helpful.
Now, is this the same wife that had to go pick up the car in Pomona?
No,
Okay.
that was my first wife. We had been divorced. Well, we were married 7 years.
I see.
Susan and I, my current wife, we've been married 44 years.
Yeah.
So,
and you know, in her position, I'm sure she doesn't want to know that the man she loves had to suffer and to hear about the suffer. But this book, Phil, The Wall, and I do believe that gave Jonathan an opportunity to connect with you, to let you know that he's all right. And I'm certain that he probably stayed with you, even though he was gone. He wasn't fully gone, just to make sure that you got out okay. This book, there's a healing of it. And talk to me. You talk about it when you shared with Phil. It felt good. Yeah, I you know this it makes reading the book. I've already read it, but it gives knowing, speaking with you gentlemen, it makes the book somewhat more special in that way. It's a special book because it's true. The combat, that last mission, the efforts crawling with Jonathan on your back, the way you did, and the aggressive flying of that pilot to get you, tells you that he was at his last. He probably was pushing his fuel load, that he might not have enough fuel to get back if he waited any longer, or they're gonna, get caught in ground fire or something. But just everything that happened brought to this point now, and with the writing of the book and meeting Phil at the church and all that, it's a great story. It's a story with a happy ending, I could see. And Phil, you have a very receptive heart, and to engage Mike and to see the story there that Mike, otherwise, especially the fact that you simplified your introduction. If you told him you were in the Coast Guard, no offense to the Coast Guard, but you know what I mean. But Mike, if you weren't a Marine, you weren't going to hear it. And that's what just makes this book, I think, all the more special. And I enjoyed reading it, and because there's a lot of other Mikes out there from different periods, different experiences. But the one experience that helps is to have somebody like Phil in your life, to have God in your life, and to just, to be vulnerable, to start the healing where that healing might be. Because we have a lot of combat veterans out there, and this country doesn't always do a very good job with those veterans. So we're kind of coming up on our hour mark. So
Hey, Dutch,
Phil,
I would just mention
sir.
if you're interested in this book, it's on Amazon. You have to be searching under books to have it come up, but all you need is the title and my name, and the book will come up for you. And as you showed that cover, that's what you see on the Amazon site.
There's
Yeah.
Phil's name. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, Mike, do you have any parting words for our audience before we sign off? And
I am not doing this for fame or fortune.
no,
I'm doing this because I believe God wants me to help civilians understand what his children go through during time of war.
yes, that's a good message. Phil, since you're
Been talking with you and your audience, Dutch, and we'll look forward to hearing people's comments as they have a chance to take a look and read Mike's story in his book.
Mike, Phil, thank you for being on the show, and thank my audience out there listening. And it's an easy read, it's a good read, and it has a message, and a very important message. And I encourage anybody that's interested to go out there and get that book. You, everybody.